And when the light fades, the column and the shadowy beings who climbed out of it are gone. And hovering where it once stood is Loop, phantasmal and resplendent, her outstretched palms still coated in flame.
Hello everybody, I'm Renocio, and today I finally finished making a doll that I've needed to make ever since I found this DC superhero girl, Supergirl, at the thrift store. This doll was a refreshing change of pace from the Monster High dolls, not only because she doesn't have a wicked lordosis, but also, look at these muscles, look at these thighs, she's so buff. The absolute second that I saw this blonde doll with a buff, beautiful body, I was like, I need to make Loop. I have no choice in the matter. So I started by wiping the face off of this doll with 100% acetone, which I did after popping her head off by heating it up with a hairdryer. And there isn't a lot of distinct molding in this doll's face, so it was actually very easy to get the paint off. Also, getting the hair junk, the glue and stuff out of her head was surprisingly hard. Doll customizing videos always make it look super easy to scrape the hair out, but this takes a lot of work. It does help if you heat it up a little bit, but still. This weird piece of rubber also popped out. I hope that's not important. Anyone who's familiar with the Adventure Zone knows that Loop is an elf. I think I've seen it said that she's a sun elf. Either way, I decided I don't like those teeny tiny Lord of the Rings type ears, so we're going big. I started by making paper drafts of the ears and then shaping them out of white Worbla. And then initially when I detached them with hot glue, I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna put some color over top of these. Boy, that was a mistake. The texture of the hot glue in the Worbla was just really unpleasant, very full of pock, so I was like, I gotta smooth this out somehow. So I used some air dry clay and covered up the ears, kind of rounded them out, used some water to make it all smooth. I matched them to her skin tone as best I could by using different shades of pastels. It was only about 3 shades, and sometimes I'd have them wet and sometimes I'd put them on dry, with layers of Mr. Super Clear in between. Once I felt the color was as close as I was gonna get to the skin tone of the doll, I put some Liquitex over top of them to make them hopefully a little more flexible. These heads are a little stiffer than Monster High heads, but not by much, and I didn't firm them up with anything, so I'm hoping this will keep the clay from cracking at the seams. Given that the face was kind of just a big flat space, it wasn't too hard to draw facial features on here. I made the eyes a little bit smaller than they were in the factory version, and I was trying to do more eyelids and lines and things, kind of like Edelon does. Per usual, most of the face shading was done with pastels, whereas most of the facial features were done with watercolor pencils, and then a little bit of white acrylic paint for her sclera. The layers of Mr. Super Clear also helped matte out her shiny ears from the Liquitex, so that was a nice side effect. Then before I glossed up her eyes and her lips, I added some gold iridescent paint to her eyebrows and her eyes and her lips, just a little fleck of color. So far we've only made dolls with yarn hair, but I wanted to try something a little bit different this time, so I cut up a couple of wigs that I have for reasons. The blonde one I kind of regret using because it had some curl to it, and that made rerooting it really difficult because the strands wouldn't lay flat. Oops. But I just cut chunks from the underside of the wig and left the top of the weft intact because I didn't want to have holes in the wig. The more orangey colored strands weren't actually from a wig, they were just wefts that I had not yet done anything with, which meant they were considerably longer, so I just figured out how long I wanted Loop's hair to be and then cut the strands in chunks to that length. Originally I wanted to give her hair red tips, and I had the super bright idea to try Sharpie dyeing, but for once in my life I had the common sense to do a test run first, and the red wouldn't stop bleeding onto my hands. There was no way to really seal it into the plastic hair. So instead I went back to the cosplay closet and I found a red wig. The red is a little bit of a cooler color than her eyebrows are, but it's close enough, we'll make it work. I mixed all the wefts together, which again was a problem because some of them were curly and some of them were shorter than others. Just trust me, don't do this. And then in chunks of about 10 strands or so, I started plugging her head. Because this doll's head was a little bit stiffer than I'm used to, and because my rerooting tools kept breaking on me, I eventually started interrogating the prisoner, making bigger holes with a pair of pliers and a bigger needle. Side note, I was having the worst time with rerooting needles because I only had either itty bitty tiny sturdy ones or big long fragile ones. Eventually I went out and bought some that were meant for embroidery and tapestry, and those were a little bit better. I wanted Loop to have a cool undercut, so I marked where I wanted her hair to be and tapered it off towards the back of her skull. And then many hours later, once her hair was all plugged, I filled in the sides of her head with flocking made from acrylic yarn. Then once everything was dry and her super cool mohawk was established, I used a hot knife to press her hair down. I could have used hot water, but I didn't trust the ears not to fall off her head. That air dry clay is very sensitive to moisture. I gave the hair a trim and put a little bit of curl into it, but because of the inconsistent length of the strands that I plugged, it ended up looking a little bit frizzy. Oops. I am fairly atrocious at costume design, so I asked my buddy Spooks to help me out on this front. He came up with 6 very different styles, and I went with the one that I felt was most appropriate for her during the Stolen Century. We wanted something that would balance fashion with function, so while we decided to add some flashy accents, the costume was meant as something someone could run in and was made with sturdy materials in mind. B had to come up with entirely new mock-ups for this entirely new body type since we're used to Monster High dolls, and they look adorable. They're like little PJs. There's a lot of fun high fantasy designs for Loop out there, but we really wanted to stick to something more practical and appropriate for a scientist and adventurer. So the glitz came in with her leggings, which wouldn't get in the way if you're running around. And B added a little bit of the same shine to the collar of her shirt just to make it all match together. The crop top and skirt were made of a sort of knit material that made them look thicker than they were. And the adorable little boots are made with actual blue leather, as is the belt. B got a big ol' head start on making the cloaks. It was actually all together by the time that I was like, oh wait, I want to do embroidery on this. So I did have to unpick a few seams before I could get to work. I based the design on the back of the cloak after a patch, which I'm pretty sure was official merch from the McElroys, but doesn't seem to exist anymore, and I put it all together basically just with the back stitch. I gave myself a chalk outline to follow, and then once I was all done with the colors, I went through the cloak with some shiny gold thread to kind of accent things a little more. The actual small model of the IPRE patch was difficult because of its teeny tiny scale. Its design was based on the enamel pin on the official store and was done mostly with acrylic paint on a broadcloth, I think this was. Writing out the letters with paint was hard, so I tried going over it with very thin embroidery floss, and it's still kind of distorted, but maybe that just goes along with the plot, you know, hard to read. And then B had the brilliant idea to give Loop a Phoenix Fire gauntlet, which she made out of cardboard all kind of glued together, and then several layers of paint. The red, yellow, and orange stage was unfortunate because it looked a little bit like ketchup and mustard, but then there was a dry brushing of gold and everything was fine. Lacking resin, we made the gemstones out of white glue and glitter. Though it's more commonly associated with her brother, where would Loop be without her Umbra staff? B painted strips of lace for the trim, made the skeleton out of toothpicks, and picked this shiny fun fabric, which I think is meant for bathing suits, for the Umbra staff's base. My partner, being the genius that she is, made 2 different kinds of umbrellas so that we could take a variety of different photos with Loop. And after some very, very careful and scary reassembly, Loop is finished. Thanks so much for watching this, guys. Loop was a lot of work to put together, but I'm really excited with how she turned out, and I really love these dolls' body types. Please let me know what you guys think via like or comment, and if you'd like to stick around and see more of these kind of things, feel free to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Because you can't make one without the other, right?